with it.
On the first point, I mean, I think my experiences were relatively commonplace. They weren't to me at the time. I thought I was the only person in the school who felt this way, but we all felt that. Everyone thinks that at a certain point. They're amazed and pleased to discover others have been thinking the same way. I thought, what is all this about constantly having to degrade yourself and say you're a wretched sinner and a miserable person and generally a worm and a toad born into sin? Why? There seems to be something degrading, masochistic about this. Then second, what's all this about being promised as if to make up for that the whole universe is designed with you in mind? That doesn't seem very likely either. But on the other hand, that's, instead of being grossly masochistic, that would be grossly solipsistic and self-centered. Religion seems to offer me both these rather warping ideas. Then there was the diseased attitude of religion to sex. One could not but notice that it had something furtive and creepy about it when matters of this sort were being discussed. Something dirty-minded, in fact. Then the absurd account it gave of how we got to be here, the nonsense of the creation fable, and then this hideous human sacrifice.
Pretty good story.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
That's, I think that's what set me thinking, well, I don't like this. I have an instinctive revulsion from it.
So many arguments here, we'll never resolve them. Wonderful writer on our site, Thomas, points out, first of all, he's cheering you on for a dagger of a diatribe, sort of holding religion and its practitioners to their own standards of humility, tolerance, and love. But he also makes this point, and he doesn't agree with you. There's nothing less poisonous than the notion that we should love ourselves and love our neighbor as ourselves. The poison lies in our inability to reduce and practice this simple truth. Is that not a religious insight? Is that not a biblical insight?
No, no, I really and truly do not think so. I won't be told, even by someone as kindly disposed as that the books, we're just not good enough for them. If only we could live up to these ancient superstitious texts. No, I think they're not good enough for us. And I'll tell you why, and I'll take the example he offers. The golden rule, so-called, that you should not do to another person what is repulsive to you, is fair enough. I mean, I think it's a bit of a tautology because some people quite clearly do need.
But leaves the love out. It doesn't have the warmth.
But you don't need the supererogatory. You don't need the superfluous or the hysterical. It says you must respect your neighbour and treat them with the respect you would require for yourself. If you're asked to love someone else, you're being asked to do a hell of a lot. Love is something rather special. And if you're asked to love them as much as you love yourself, the presumption being you love yourself presumably a fair amount, or let's say your family or your loved ones, well, you're being asked the impossible, and that's important to point out. It's not in us to do that. We cannot, in fact, do it. But by being demanded of us, we can always be sure that we can be accused of a shortcoming. We're always guilty again. We didn't quite live up to it. Another occasion for fawning and grovelling and saying, sackcloth and ashes on the head, I'm not worthy. I don't like this. I don't think it's a wholesome attitude to life. I think it's actually a rather horrible attitude to life.
Chris Hitchens, what is it in this American moment or the world moment, this we're told hyper-religious American moment that prompts this book, and that accounts for its rather remarkable quick reception?
Well, no, the moment, I would say, if there is one in the zeitgeist at present, is rather the other way. I mean, the success of my much more eminent predecessors, Professors Dawkins and Dennett, for example, and Sam Harris.
Oh, come on, you're so proud of outselling them. You must be.
Out of their books, is which manured the ground for me, and on whose coattails I am. It's testimony, I think, to something I've found everywhere I've been. I've just spent a very interesting week touring the South and stopping at all kinds of places and finding everywhere very large and enthusiastic crowds of people who want to show that it's not true that they are all believers in mountebanks and frauds like Jerry Falwell, that they're fed up with religious coercion and big-mouth clerics telling them that their children should be taught pseudoscience in school and so forth. There's a big pushback to this.
Hold it there for a short break. We'll come back to this moment of perhaps a late Reformation accounting of religion. We're talking with Christopher Hitchens. This is Open Source. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Dave Miller, Open Source Senior Producer. Robin was making calls all day for the passion of the library, a passion that, she notes, is in her blood. Her mom works at what she calls the world's largest repository of organized knowledge, the Library of Congress. We're looking back with library nostalgia and forward, wondering how libraries will have to change in the digital age. Stick up for Dewey and his decimals at radioopensource.org.
Open Source is produced in association with WGBH Radio in Boston. This is Open Source from PRI. I'm Christopher Lydon. This is Open Source. Christopher Hitchens is our guest. His new book, much talked about, number 3 on the bestseller list in the New York Times yesterday, is called God is Not Great, or How Religion Poisons Everything. You were speaking about this moment of a peculiar kind of receptiveness to these books, these arguments, this kind of revoicing the religious question. What's going on?
Well, take your pick. If you look around the world just now, the parties of God are destroying the civil society of Iraq, reducing it to beggary, penury, fear, misery. The next door, a fanatical party that believes in the return of a tooth fairy imam is about to get its hands on a nuclear weapon. On the West by illegal means, and I've loved nothing else but to talk about the end of days and the apocalypse. On the West Bank, Jewish settlers are trying to say the same about the onset of the Messiah. If they could only get the Messiah and bring on Armageddon and usher in the end of days, everything would be fine. The Pope says that, okay, limbo was a mistake. We sent all those children there by mistake. But we better start talking about hell more seriously. And by the way, in Africa, AIDS might be thought to be bad, but nothing like as bad as condoms. And let's not have any stem cell research. And then in this country, idiots want pseudoscience to be taught by the state to children under the absurd name of intelligent design. There's a general mood I find everywhere I go, and from my email and from the response to the book itself, of what you might call enough already to this. Enough of this endless religious bullying and clerical nastiness. And enough to the president not being able to stop saying God bless all the time and throwing his arms around that thug, Vladimir Putin, and saying he must be a nice guy because he's got a crucifix around his neck.
I thought you were going to...
Enough to the idea that faith demands respect. I'm fed up with being told you must respect people and respect people of faith. Why should I? These are people who not only announce that they will take something without evidence and demand in turn that I listen to them. And
Let's stay close to home, too. Peggy Sue on our site writes, she's wondering, why now for these arguments? And she says, it's painfully obvious. We have a born-again Christian president taking our country straight to hell on a Christian fundamentalist base that elected him twice. She goes on to say, for all that, I would argue that it isn't religion, it's self-righteousness, intolerance, bigotry that are the problems, and that although bigots like to cloak themselves in religion, atheists can be just as stupid, self-righteousness, and intolerant as anyone else. The question that keeps coming up in the conversation in the thread is the problem religion, Christopher Hitchens, or the marriage of religion and power, most especially military power?
Very well. I would say it's a very good challenge. I'd say that the problem is faith. In other words, the willingness to believe things without evidence. And also the willingness to believe things that are based on wish thinking, such as religion says that you're not really going to die. That maybe
weapons of mass destruction in Iraq fits into the file on wish thinking, doesn't it?
No, of course not. Nobody wished there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
You don't think?
No, nobody wished there were. Believing that something exists because you wish it, or that something will happen because you wish it, or holding a faith that is wish-based is quite different from that. The things that are evidence-based.
We're talking about a faith-based...
Things that are evidence-based fall on confrontations with contrary evidence, as you've just illustrated.
The war was launched on the basis, on a faith-based analysis, it would seem in hindsight.